Oh, wait, I just heard a noise.
Did it work?
Oh my gosh, it worked. Okay, let me turn down my speakers though, because that's going to be way loud.
All right. Nice.
Okay, let me turn it down. This is so strange. I don't know why. It's still saying that I don't have speakers detected on my Hangouts, but okay. So
it's Google's gulag. Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so alrighty. So let's go ahead and finally, let's get this show on the road.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And I will just, since I have been speaking this whole time, I will just let you come here and say what you want to say. Ask me some questions or whatever we're going to do.
Okay. This is actually a hilarious story. I am an admin for the Liberalists on the Liberals page. It was kind of a group formed by the ideas of Sargon of Akkad saying we're going to be activists for classical liberalism. And on the Twitter, because I got control of the Twitter, much to the United Kingdom group's horror and dismay, this American Texan running amok on Twitter, making fun of alt-right individuals, they were thoroughly embarrassed. But the reason that I found you was because I got in hot water for posting the following tweet. I will gladly debate the alt-right on the conditions that, and I'm listing qualifications for things that I want from the individual that I debate on, the Ethnostate, and all this wonderful things. I say, 1, he is married to a white woman. 2, has at least 6 biological children. 3, is of proper Aryan, white stock. 4, has a concise 3 or more point plan to enact the Ethnostate in at least 15 years. You don't need that. I'm just being an ass at this point. And 5, not a hypocrite cuck. Now, here's what I love about this conversation. I'm also a Mormon. I'm also LDS.
Okay.
So we have. There's not going to be a better level playing field to have this conversation, because you are pretty much all of these things. You live your principles. You live your values. You want others to have what you have, and that's awesome. You are my steel woman in terms of discussing the Ethnostate, why it should be, why it perhaps shouldn't be, and just my primary question that I sent to you first on Gab was, how would an Ethnostate be achieved, and how would it be?
Oh, did I lose you? Oh,
that's
shoot.
A lot.
Oh, you were breaking up there for a bit. I couldn't hear you. You said, how would the Ethnostate be achieved? And then it broke up.
And how would it be better per se than a civic national society if racial policies were enforced?
Okay, so let's clarify some terms here. Okay, so let's take the first question. How would the Ethnostate be achieved? So how are you defining an Ethnostate? Because I think that a lot of times what I run into just off the top is that a lot of people don't quite agree on even what that is and what that looks like. And so I might not even want an Ethnostate by your definition of an Ethnostate. Do you know what I mean?
No,
so
and I agree with you. In fact, in a recent debate we had with alt-hype, no, it was either alt-hype or Cedarwood, but I believe it was Cedarwood who made the point that you're not technically an Ethnostate unless you're like Israel and you have a racial quota for a certain group. I'm not sure if that's what you're advocating for.
Okay. Well, I sort of am in a way. I don't know about a quota per se, but
well, he says 80 or 90%, and I'm like, well, that's pretty damn high.
Yeah. Well, I would. I mean, I guess, yeah. Then I guess I would qualify in those terms, because I would definitely want between 80 and 90%. I always kind of, when I say talk about white nationalism, I say, I'm a majority white nationalist for America, Canada, Australia, sort of this, the European diaspora nations, and definitely a white nationalist for Europe. That doesn't mean that there can't be non-white people living in Europe, just that it's understood that is the ethnic homeland of European peoples, and therefore they have the right to, you know, pretty much total sovereignty over that, the way we look at Japan or China having sovereignty over their nations. But then, yeah, I understand that for places, again, like Australia, Canada, America, that those are different, a little bit different in that they were not originally established as exact, you know, they obviously aren't an ethnic homeland for white people, but they were
Well, and
established.
what's really strange is we want to say that America was an ethnostate in the 1950s or up until the 1950s, despite the fact that we, of our own volition, immigrated migrants from Africa for the intent of slave labor. You can't claim that you want an ethnostate and have a lower class of people without it biting you in the ass later. That's just that's a historical truth. Even in we see this happening in South Africa, but that was, you know, it was reversed. You had a majority population of blacks and a minority of whites, and so that happened a lot faster. It happened slower, and it's happening slower in America because, you know, the blacks were still a minority population, but the same racial policies are still being just as disastrous. In other civilizations, for example, even in Viking culture and in Roman law, there were no racial policies. But even despite this, you know, they had slave wars, servile wars from Sicily, who, despite also being, you know, obviously of African descent, were heavily influenced by the Greek Spartans. So the more in history I look toward these arguments, the less and less I see race being a factor, even though on the macro scale it seems to be.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a good point. I think that when we're looking at something like that, and I'm obviously a huge advocate from observing history and learning from it and applying that, what seems to be inevitable realities from history towards the future. But then also what we're looking at when we look back at those nation states also is that we live in a time of different transportation and different interaction on a global level than obviously they had. And so to say that it has to be like kind of either civic nationalism or some kind of like pure race state, otherwise it's inevitably going to fall if it has 10% or 15% minority population, I think that's kind of a false dichotomy. Like, I don't think that that's necessarily true given how much things have changed in a variety of ways, not only in our ability for, well, first of all, because, you know, a pure ethnostate, I just don't even think is possible simply because of you know, our ability.
It's not only impossible, it's not beneficial. It's not good to have a racial policy in terms of an ethnostate, because what you're doing is when you say you belong to this group of people, you are superior. You're in essence telling someone.
Do you think that the
yes,
Japanese are saying they're superior?
But let me continue.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, and I think it's either Japan or no, it is Japan. They lie on their senses about who is or is not Japanese to hide the racial tensions that are in there. But what I'm trying to say is when you tell someone that just because you are part of this race or part of this color, what you can do is you can basically tell them, oh, I don't have to work to become all I can be for my community and for my nation. You have to give them an individual incentive, which is what the liberalists are all about. We are about the individual.
Right, but has that been historically true? Because I would argue it hasn't, because for the most part in human history, we have been incredibly racially segregated. If you went back to England 500 years ago, you could live your entire life and never see somebody who was not a native, ethnically Anglo-Saxon British person in the small villages people grew up in. Yet those people, the British in particular, you know, rose up to build an empire that conquered the globe. So I don't think that having a pure ethnostate would necessarily diminish the individual drive. In fact, I would say in a lot of cases, fighting for a nation that you feel very connected to, not just in terms of ideas, but fighting for somebody who's literally your family, even on a genetic level, which I think is something that was implicitly understood, not the genetic part of it, but it was understood your nation was your family back several hundred years ago. And now we have the genetics to show the interconnectivity and the familiarity genetically between racial groups. And then we can say so whether we're looking at it in a traditional sense or we're looking at it from a scientific sense, to say that, you know, I am fighting on behalf of my people, my country, my family, just as the Bible actually tells us to care for those of our household. Then I think,
and also for the stranger,
you can achieve a lot of great things. I don't think that you need to have a hyper individualism.
I would not disagree with the from the stance of history, but what I would say is that the history of those nations, like Britain, who spanned the world, is, well, let's just say the EU fucked them over with immigration. Well, we're going to start with that.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of integrating other races or having more exposure to that, I think it's clear to see that in recent times, the advancements of technology have changed that dynamic, to the point where it might not be so. We might want someone from a foreign country who's not from our family, but who will serve us better as a nation, or not even as a nation, just an.
Oh, you're breaking up again. Hello.
Approach.
Oh, okay. I missed the middle part of what you just said. You cut out again.
Well, all I'm saying is not just the nation saying that they want some specific individual, but maybe a private company saying, yes, you are valuable. We want this person over here.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that I think going forward that the best idea of an ethnostate would be a racial majority that allowed for a racial minority, as long as that racial minority understood that the culture, the language, and the customs in that country were going to be that of the majority and not demand special privileges and special rights based on their uniqueness.
Okay, so here's our impasse. We agree that having a strong community, a strong sense of family and nationality is important. The question with ethno-nationalism is, where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line at a certain set of genetic factors from 23andMe, or do you just say, this is our society, this is our home, these are our rules? Because if you say these are our rules, that's civic nationalism, regardless of whatever the genetic composition is.
Mm-hmm. Well, because, go ahead. Sorry.
Because my whole deal is, you know, if we as white people establish a rule of law that we expect to be honored, our sin is not letting people in and, you know, wanting to kick them out. Our sin has been letting these people in and not holding them up to our values.
Well, and definitely, I would agree with you there. What I think, well, I would say that
that's still civic nationalism. That's still civic nationalism.
Well, I would ask you, would you consider the Amish and Old Order Mennonites to be in and of themselves like an ethno group, or would you consider them to be a civic group?
Oh, they are a civic group. They are not united based on the color of their skin. They're colored based on a religious belief.
Yes, but then yeah.
Okay, go on.
Oh, sorry. So they kind of say this is our space and these are our rules and this is how we live our lives. Now, are there any Black people that convert to being Amish?
Not that I know of. I mean, they've been very exclusive in their landlock. But that doesn't mean that a Black person cannot go into their land and adopt their culture.
Yes, they could, but has anyone ever done it?
I'm not sure about the Amish specifically, but I know of other predominantly white religions and cultures where, yes, Black people have joined.
Right.
And another example I'll give is recently in America, I've become aware of the reality of when I meet a modern African migrant coming to America, for whatever reason, the modern African migrant is far more able to integrate into American society and be successful than native Black Americans.
Yes, that's actually that's a very curious thing, which is kind of, I don't want to get off too much on the weeds. Let me bring you back. We could talk about that in a minute. Let's come back. So my idea of an ethnostate looks a lot like the Amish and the Old Order Mennonites, and here's why. It is a set of rules and it's a set of values. Those rules and those values tend to overwhelmingly appeal to one race, and that would be white people. And I would even say it more specifically, the regimented austerity of the Amish appeals even more specifically to very Germanic people. That isn't to say that other people aren't allowed to convert to Amish, or other people haven't gone and lived with the Amish. And if you go on YouTube, you can find shows where people, send teenagers, wayward teenagers and things like that to live with the Amish in situations like this, where you can see that overwhelmingly the white children integrate better into that society than do the Black teenagers. However, there is a case of an Asian woman who became Old Order Mennonite. So then you can see on a micro scale in the Amish community what plays out on a macro scale in the world, in that there are certain values and ways of living that appeal to white people that also have a small overlap with Asians. We tend to get on better with Asians, culturally speaking, in general. And there's going to be a little bit of overlap, obviously, with Latinos and whatnot. And there's going to be a larger dichotomy between, or a larger spanning between whites and Blacks. Now, again, that's not to say that a Black person who isn't committed to living an Amish lifestyle couldn't become Amish, and they would be welcome in that community. And that's my view of an ethnostate. My view of an ethnostate is, this is our home, these are our rules, with the understanding, and I have the understanding that my home and my rules are overwhelmingly going to appeal to people who have a similar genetic makeup to me. That doesn't mean that and again, I've talked about often, one of my dearest friends is Black, and she would fit in with Lord of the Rings. Like, you could take her to the most European of things, and that girl would fit right in, because she's like, that's her heart, that's who she is. She loves all of that, and she would fit in great, and she would do the work. And so for people like that, who would love the culture, who would follow the rules, who would do all of this, that would be fine to have them there. But we would have to understand that they are going to be a very slim minority, because that lifestyle of that set of rules isn't going to to appeal much outside of white people. And then that allows those people who are Asian, Black, whatever, Latino, who would, could make the cut to be there and to function, but it would be overwhelmingly white.
So, are you familiar with the Mormon phenomena in Tonga?
Not especially, no. I mean, I obviously know that there is that the Mormon Church is growing very rapidly amongst
No. It's not
cultures.
No, it's not growing rapidly. We are the majority.
Okay.
Tonga, the Kingdom of Tonga, is 60% Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially curious because the Kingdom of Tonga is the last true monarchy in the world. There is no legislative power limiting the power of the King of Tonga. The Mormon Church is not the state religion of Tonga.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by your logic, your case rests on the idea that you would also agree that Mormonism is also, like the Amish, a white-based religion.
No.
Or a system of belief.
No, I actually wouldn't argue that for Mormonism. I think that Mormonism is going to appeal
I've
more.
had several ethnos tell me otherwise.
But No, I wouldn't, when we get into religion, I wouldn't, obviously, no, the Amish I was talking about not in their in theological practice, but in their everyday life practice, because it is so vastly different and so regimented, as I said. But no, I would argue that most religions, even Christian religions, you probably are going to appeal mostly to white people, but obviously, Catholicism took over in Latin America among for lack of a better term, like the Aztec, the Indians down there, and the mestizos population very well. Obviously, in fact, I mean, gosh, South America is holding on to Catholicism better than any white nation that I know of.
Very
so
true.
I would say that theology. See, here's where I'm coming from. If we're going to get into spirituality, the gospel of Jesus Christ is for everyone. We're all God's children. So, I mean, the Mormon church or the Catholic church or a Calvinist church or a Protestant church flourishing in Nigeria, Africa, Tonga, China. I mean, I'm not surprised by that. Of course it is. It's true. I think Christianity is true. It's the word of God. And any of God's children, when they hear that message, are going to very naturally resonate with it. But I will say this, that when I lived in Utah, the ward that met after my ward that I attended for the last 2 years of living in Utah was a Tongan ward. And they culturally looked and acted very different than the majority white wards. Now, that's not to say that they weren't they were passionate about the gospel. They loved Christ. They were, as far as I know, very good members of the church. From everything I could observe, they were following the rules and living the word of wisdom and had temple recommends and were taking care of their families. But they did have a lot of different cultural practices, such that they had a specific Tongan ward meeting the way they have Spanish wards meeting, because culturally they got together a little bit better and things flowed a little better when they got, when they had, and it wasn't that there was a huge Tongan population. Like, it wasn't, there was a big neighborhood right next to me that was Tongan and they just drew the boundaries around that neighborhood. No, it was specifically a Tongan ward. And again, we see that. Now, Mormonism is one of the most integrated religions, particularly as far as church attendance, because you go to church based on where you live. So in that respect, they might, to draw the border anywhere, and you might live, 5 blocks from the black neighborhood, but half the black neighborhood might be drawn into your ward. And so you're going to go where your ward is, unlike, Catholic or Protestant, which can kind of pick their church. And then we see then people again tend to separate out into races. You tend to have black churches, you tend to have white churches, you tend to have Asian churches. And even within that, something like Catholicism, for example, that has all of these little off branches, you have, the Slavic or the Ukrainian churches and the Greek church and, things like this. They even further delineate between those where the populations are high enough to do so. And, in churches like Catholic churches where maybe there's, a very small population, they're Greek and Slavic, well, they'll all go to church together until the population grows. And if the population grows amongst the Greeks and Slavics such that they can, bifurcate and form their own parishes, they tend to do that. And they divide again along ethnic lines. They don't divide around geography or any, what block they live on or who works where or any other any of those sorts of things.
All right. Okay, so I don't know where to go from here. I guess my question is, I want to understand
seconds, about 15 seconds or so. I'm sorry. You had just started talking and it cut out.
Oh, it did the same thing for you not 2 seconds ago, so it's the connection, it's not us.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just saying, I don't understand the benefit of an ethnostate enforcing racial policies if we're going to agree that the values are what's most important. But we're trying to go towards the same goal. I just think that we're seeing two different causes as suspect, if you will.
Okay, well, I think this is where you and I are kind of not agreeing on terms of what an ethnostate is in the first place. And I can't speak for anybody else that's an identitarian or anything. But for me, again, the ethnostate is very much like the Amish in that we say this is our land, these are our rules, this is what we are going to do and not do, this is what we're going to enforce and not enforce, with the understanding that those rules are what happen to make white people feel the most comfortable and appeal to white people. And again, we'll understand that there's going to be black people like my friend who is going to integrate into that kind of a lifestyle very well. There's probably going to be people from India that would integrate very well, but they're going to be a minority, and they're going to live in a nation with the understanding that this is a white culture, that our values and our systems are what they are, I guess. I mean, for lack of a better term, they are going to be the system that benefits and appeals to, well, I shouldn't say benefits, but I should just say appeals to white people. And that is going to, it will naturally preserve white people, which is something that I'm very concerned about, given that we used to be 30% of the population and now we're 7%. And it also gives us a place to live where we feel like we have a compatibility of cultures. And, particularly for someone like me, I'm raising children. I want to be able to send my kids out the door in my neighborhood and know that the Muslim guy down the street isn't going to think my 5-year-old daughter is on the market as far as marriageability.
Yeah,
right.
No,
and so,
no.
right. And so again, if there's an Asian guy down the street, if I'm living on a block of 10 people, 9 of us are white families, but the Asian guy or the black guy or whoever's there understands that this is a white culture and we are what, these are our values and our systems. And, we don't have child brides. We don't have anything like this. Then,
understood. There's another problem though with that. And the problem is with actually white people. There was another, Cedarwood did a debate with Academic Agent, and they brought up this very interesting phenomena with white people. White nations with high IQ also tested very highly with high trust, meaning that they were accepting of other nations and other cultures and other ideas, and they were very open to them. And that is, and there's a reason why that correlates with high IQ. Because you're more easily to adapt and innovate and create, and that's truly the mechanism combined with IQ that made us, the British Empire expand and the American economy boom was that combination, and just our drive towards individualism and just exploration on those ideas. The reason why it's detrimental to an ethnos or an ethnostate or something where white people are supposedly looking up for themselves is we're going to take the path of least resistance when it comes to benefiting ourselves. We're not going to do, like, for example, I'm not going to say your definition of an ethnostate. I'm just going to say those ethnostates which were described earlier. I think that your definition of an ethnostate is not that different from my definition of a civic nationalism. It's not that different. In fact, if you were to go back to the history of classical liberalism, that is technically a predominantly white philosophy, but it was equally applied to everyone for those living in those nation states. And it was those principles and values that made those states flourish, regardless of their genetic composition. Now, the reason why it's relevant that we have this relationship between high IQ and trust is because, for example, if an ethnic policy were put in place, and you were to say, get rid of the majority of the Hispanics and the blacks, what would happen is, if you were to do that tomorrow, you would raise the prices of agriculture and services, like hotels, kitchens, food would skyrocket, And
Yeah,
within 5 years,
I don't agree with that though.
I understand you don't, but some
Yeah.
of the other people on your side, Richard Spencer, Alt Hype, Cedarwood, they do. And they say if we implement this tomorrow, it'll be for the greater good. And what they don't understand is that white people, in and of ourselves, will revolt it. We will turn it away because it's not in our own personal best interest to do so.
I'm not sure if I understand what you were saying there, because I don't believe that agriculture and all of that would skyrocket. I think that as long as we do some measured step processes to trying to regain, basically regain control of our country here in America, speaking of America, then
I'm not morally opposed to having our children work in the fields again, like they had been, making the what's landscaping a summer job, like
right.
making having your that used to be a kid's job. That used to be some poor kid's gas money, his allowance for the week. That was an inter-community service from within the community for the benefit of those who wanted to take it, and that was usually reserved for the children. And we should truly get back to that, but we as parents and as we are to blame. We are to blame for letting that slip through the cracks. We would rather resource it to someone who knows what they're doing rather than teach our own children what hard work is.
Oh, I agree. I think
that's our responsibility.
Yeah, that the people who are adults now, and then obviously our parents and even our grandparents.
Oh, I was perfectly spoiled. I'm going to admit it. I don't have the hard work ethic I should.
And I was too. I've spoken about it on my show a couple of times. I was given a car when I was 16. I mean, it wasn't a brand new car or anything like that, but I was given a car. I was given gas money. I was, my dad paid my way through college, not graduate school, but he did pay for my undergraduate, and so he thought he was, again, he was doing it because he loved me and was trying to give me the best and give me all the advantages. But, it took me, oh, sorry, my phone is buzzing. It took a very long time for me to realize what a good, honest day's hard work is. And I still struggle with that because, again, and life is so easy with technology and everything as well, that we've lost a lot of the work ethic. And that goes back about 6 generations. Actually, if you look at it,
it does.
It goes back about 100 years. Now that we've just, we slipped just a little bit each generation. And now we're at this point where, kids are just the kids today that are, teenagers, they've for the most part been very spoiled. And even for parents like myself who are trying to not spoil our kids, it's really hard because the world exists as it is. I can't exactly just tell my kid, well, you go run 50 laps around the yard just so you know what it's like to work hard. I mean, he's going to look at me like I'm insane.
And it's bizarre watching going to your kid's science fair or whatever, and you realize your child's not competing with other kids. Your child's competing with the kid's parent. And you're like,
oh, right.
No, I made my kid do this themselves. Screw you. So no, there is that true disconnect that we've done.
Yeah.
Is it really fair that we're putting this burden on the minorities who moved in? I mean, we need to get our own damn house in order.
Oh, we certainly do. But yeah, but part of that is, reversing some of these wrongs that have been done in the past, and certainly that specific part of it is not necessarily, a guy who's a migrant farmer in California, his problem, but he needs to go home and he needs to take care of his country, and we need to take care of our country. Oh, I don't know if you're still there. Oh, okay.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I was processing it, and I'm like, yeah, well, all I'm going to say is let California sink into the ocean, and we'll take it from there.
California may be too far gone. You're right, but I don't know.
California is too far gone. There's no if.
Yes.
I moved from California to Texas for a reason, other than marrying my wife.
Yeah. My husband and I met in California when I was in graduate school, and we lived there for 9 years and had our first couple of kids there. And then we lived in Utah for a while, and then we left Utah. But at any rate, Yeah, so yeah, California is it's a pretty crazy place. I don't know if it is salvageable. You're right.
All I'm going to say is, there are plenty of people. Again, I don't believe in making, because I am a liberalist. I'm an activist for liberal values. I am not going to fault someone for seeking their own best interest. All I want, in addition to people seeking their own best interest, is that they follow the laws. They follow the rules. That is.
But well, okay, I guess, yeah. Again, that would be where we would disagree on what, I mean, I would agree with you on principle, but I don't think it's faulting a Mexican to make them go back to Mexico. I don't actually think that that's
but
a burden or a hardship. I think,
and legal, and they have their own families here already. What's the big deal?
Yeah. Well, definitely, if we don't want America to become Mexico, that's the big deal, because they outbreed us. I mean, just quite frankly, I mean, just to be very blunt about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but whose fault is that?
Oh, definitely. I'm not saying it's not our fault. That's why one of my policies that I would implement in achieving, I guess, for lack of a better term, what might be termed an ethnostate for this debate, would be to promote traditional family values again amongst white people, so that we have a high birth rate and that we have more functional families with fathers in the home more consistently, and that we would do that through equal and fair access, because I do believe that it biologically and spiritually, that's the natural way that most people want to be. The overwhelming majority of people want to get married. They want to have several children. They want to have that lifestyle. And if we allowed, if we pass bills like, shall not censor, and, access to free speech, if we get social media and other platforms to be seen as public squares and utilities and allowed free speech, then we wouldn't have to make government policies even. We would just promote basically the things I promote, which is what I call trad life, traditional values, and a lot of white people would naturally and freely want to adopt these values if given the chance to. And I think one of the things that we see right now is that.
Here's my question then.
Yeah.
Here's my question then. Let's say we are completely successful in implementing the values that you seek to have in America and for our country. Even so, would America be a successful ethnostate?
Successful by what definition? What do you consider success?
A successful ethnostate in the regard that we are focused on a majority white population.
Oh, would it, if we implemented everything that I would want to implement, would we be a majority white population? Is this what you're saying? Yes, I believe so. Now, again, we're talking about, future things. So obviously, I can't predict the future, but I think that looking at current trends, looking at genetics, looking at voting patterns, looking at, looking historically, I think that, yeah, if we were to implement, I actually have it written out. What is this? It's a 13-point plan. If we had, if we implemented all 13 of my points of my plan, then yeah, I think that we would end up with an overwhelming majority of white people in America.
Would it be as high as 80 or 90%? Would it be that high?
I think that it would start. I think that it would work its way up to that. I think that it would start out fairly quickly to be about between 75 and 80. If given that, it's kind of hard to find out how many whites are currently in America. I've looked it up and you get different things. But if we're at about 67%, which is what I've seen most recently, if that number is true, then I think that within, 10 years of my implementing my policies, you would definitely see at least 75 to 80%. And then going forward, as we did things like withdrew the welfare state, and weren't incentivizing low-income people to have babies. And that includes, I mean, that's not just blacks and Latinos. It's not just the stereotype there. It includes non-functional white people. If we withdrew the welfare state,
I agree with the welfare state.
And let the birth rate, basically what we want to do is flip the birth rate right now. The birth rate we have is, you know, we're going towards that movie Idiocracy. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where we're incentivizing dumb people to have babies regardless of race. We're incentivizing all the dumb people in our country to have a lot of babies, and we're de-incentivizing smart people to have babies. So we need to get that flipped around, and then that is going to come out, because I mean, I do believe in race and IQ. Again, there are exceptions, but in general, whites do have a higher IQ than other populations. And so if we did flip it to where more competent people were having more babies, then that's going to equal more white people.
Yeah, the problem with those that 65% white stat is, you know, that at least 20 to 25 to 50% of those stats are Hispanics.
Yeah, they might be. And then Hispanics is a funny question too, because obviously they're a mixed race people that's not consistently mixed, right? So
exactly.
you have Ted Cruz, you know, for all intents and purposes, I think Ted Cruz is white. You know, I mean, he's Cuban.
Ooh, how dare you, madam.
Yeah.
Failed the one drop test.
Right, but I think, yeah, you know, I mean, someone like Ted Cruz is a pretty white dude. And then, of course, you've even got people, I believe Selma Hayek, the actress, is actually ethnically Lebanese, although she's from Mexico, because there was some Lebanese colonies or something there. I don't remember the details, but at any rate, so you know, definitely you have different, they're a mixed race people, and you've got different mixes. You've got the people that obviously are majority Indian, Aztec, and then you've got a lot of them that have freckles and red hair and blonde, blonde hair.
Interesting factoid. There is a population in Mexico with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, no, it's because the Mormons went down there when they outlawed polygamy.
Right. That's, yeah, Mitt Romney's father or grandfather or somebody.
Yeah, the Romney clan are Mexicans.
Yeah, right.
Little did we know.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, I think Latinos, that's just such. It's
bizarre. It's bizarre.
It's a different thing. It's a different thing. So you do have ethnically white Latinos, and then you've got people that are a mix, but they're majority one or the other. And then you've got people that are almost exclusively Indian, like, you know, that have, you know, still living up in the mountains of Peru or wherever. So that's a more complicated thing. So yeah, as far as, you know, again, I don't know what the actual stats are as far as white people, and by white people, I would define that as people that are, I don't know, 75% or more ethnically European. I don't know. I'm just, you know, I'm a little bit rare in that I'm happy to, I understand mixed race people exist, not only just Latino people, but of other mixed races. And I know people who are mixed race who say, look, I feel no connection and affinity with, you know, my 1/4 black or my whatever it is, you know, and I'm, you know, I feel like I'm white, I'm majority white, and I like white culture or whatever. And, you know, I would be happy, you know, to have them. They, you know, they marry white people, they have white children. You know, again, I was given a lot of flack by some in the alt-right because I didn't have that big, you know, I didn't have a problem per se with Meghan Markle marrying into the royal family. And even ethnically speaking, and as far as just even morally, I feel like he can marry whoever he wants. That's not my business who he marries. But even when we're talking about ethnicity, you know, she's half black. You know, most African Americans have 20% white DNA anyway. So we're talking about what, she's like 60% European. He's white. I mean, their kids could have red hair. I wasn't that freaked out about it.
That's actually a thing. That's actually a thing. Ever since Red Fox, there are black people with thick curly red hair. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And that
is actually the thing.
Yeah. And then, but you know, and it's interesting though, what I absolutely detested about the Meghan Markle thing was the way blacks, and particularly in America, were celebrating it and saying like, oh, we in the royal family now, we taking over, you know. And I actually
one woman took over.
Right.
You're still in the slums with everyone else.
One woman who's probably, if you did a 23andMe on her, probably majority European anyways, you know, like I said, probably a good 60% at least. You know, that's, yeah, but the way they treated that, you know, whereas in the reverse, if you had, you know, the King of Morocco marrying a white girl, like a Grace Kelly kind of a figure, blonde, blue-eyed, lovely white girl, and white people took to Twitter and were like, "Oh, you know, Morocco about to go pale up in here, y'all. Like, we's gonna take over." Like, everybody would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's horribly racist." White people
Actually, no. There is a phenomena in Brazil where the darker great grandmother or the grandmother encourages her daughter to marry a whiter man, so that the children will be whiter.
Yeah.
And it's seen as kind of like their culture of beauty and standards of beauty. And I'm not that keen on it either. But the true reverse of the whole black thing, and you know, them getting into the royal family, is I am equally disgusted by immoral white trailer parks. I mean, we have our own problems, and I'm not going to put myself as like the color of my skin or my genetics as, you know, the end all and be all, because it isn't. We have garbage too.
I don't put mine as the end all and be all, but I do say that it is important. They are slated for extinction. You know, if you look at demographic trends across the world, you know, whites used to be 30% of the population, now we're 7%. By some estimations, Ireland, for example, is going to be majority non-Irish by 2040. So that's going to happen in my lifetime. And so, you know, so things like that, that's what I say, look, you know, right now, what we need to look at this from two different perspectives. So there's definitely the ethnostate. There's, like, you know, getting to a place in the future where you know, we have the rules and the society and kind of a cultural cohesiveness again in our world that we want. But there's also just the immediate thing of white people are going to disappear off the planet if we don't do something, and we have to do something now. And I think that it would be, you know, and again, I've said this multiple times. This is actually, I know I used to be a liberal. This is a liberal position. This is, I'm coming at it from my you know, my days when I was in the Free Tibet movement, and I was boycotting China because I wanted them out of Tibet. I wanted Tibetans to have sovereignty, the same way, and I want Arabs out of Ireland. I want Ireland to stay Irish, you know. So this is another thing. And Ireland.
No. Immigration is completely something else. And as far as the whole immigration debate goes, I mean, close the borders, lock it up.
Yes.
I mean, that to me is still a civic national duty and position. That is a civic national value, as far as I am concerned. Yeah. Because, you know, we even though we're civic nationalists, we still deserve to have a national identity. And when you let people with other identities and other values, and they deteriorate the national identity, and that is still unacceptable.
Right. Yes. Well, I think that for people such as yourself, for liberalists, civic nationalists, and for people, I would, you know, call myself more an identitarian and an ethno-nationalist. I think, though, you know, on a Venn diagram, our circles are overlapping quite a lot, and we're agreeing on, probably, at least you and I seem to be agreeing on a vast majority of things. And so I'm always a kind of a big tent thinker, and I'm really happy to work with a lot of different people, you know, towards commonalities and common goals. And right now I feel like, you know, the house is on fire. Let's put out the fire, and then we can discuss how to rebuild. You know, I think that, you know, and your idea of rebuilding might look slightly different than mine, you know, but let's hash those details out later. Let's put out the fire, because right now, again, like I said, you know, you and I might in our lifetime see the end of Ireland, or, you know, Germany and places like this. So let's make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that. No, I really am. So you would differ significantly from, say, Richard Spencer, Mike Enoch, the alt-type Cedarwood. You really would take issue with them just carving out an ethnostate right in the middle of America.
Well, no, I am for sovereignty of where people live. So for sure, if there was a group of people and they said, look, we want to get together and make this area, we want to move to this area of Montana and or whatever, and we want to build our ethnostate, or even start small, like we just want to build, white condos and this is for white people. I'm totally fine with them doing that. I am also totally fine with Black people in Alabama getting together and saying this is a Black neighborhood in the Black space and we want this for Black people. I'm also totally fine with that. And so I am for personal liberty and sovereignty as far as that goes. Now, would I live in the all-white condo or the all-white gated neighborhood or the all-white ethnostate? I don't know. I mean, we'll see what it looks like. Maybe I would, but like I said, I have friends and I have family of a variety of ethnicities. So, would I maybe live there and then go visit my friends outside of there? I don't know. I don't know what that would look like, but I am absolutely fine with people carving out an area and saying we're going to live here and we don't want people to force diversity on us. And again, it's not just for white people. That would be, I would agree to that for anybody. In fact, I think, we do that for Native Americans in an effort to preserve their culture and their people.
And look at the conditions they live in. The conditions of the Native Americans are
yes, but I think that has some other factors there. Obviously, alcoholism is rampant. I don't want to get into all of that, but definitely there's other issues there. However,
it's not ideal, but I am not convinced that ethno-nationalists left to their own devices will be self-sufficient or self-reliant. That they would be,
and that's fine, and maybe they wouldn't be, but that's up to. I feel like if they want to give that a shot, then they have every right to do it. And maybe it collapses horribly and it doesn't work. And maybe it's wonderful and it thrives and it works wonderful when they're putting people on Mars. I don't know. It could go extreme in either direction, or it could be kind of somewhere in the middle.
Ethnostate on Mars.
Yeah. So I don't know. And again, all I can do is kind of look at current projections. I can look at history and kind of try to extrapolate things out and look at it. But I definitely, again, I'm totally for the sovereignty of, seriously, the sovereignty of God's children to preserve themselves. And that I come at that from, again, a global perspective, in that, Japanese people, tomorrow, we're never letting another non-Japanese person migrate here, and we're kicking out Black Pigeon Speaks, or whatever, okay, it's your place and you have that right. And again, if Richard Spencer and Mike Enoch took a group of people and carved out some space up in Montana or again, wherever, I just say Montana because I know that he lived there and has family there, but I'm just using that as an example. But or if they took over a little area and say this is our area, whatever, and that has been tried before. Nietzsche's sister tried that with her husband. They tried down in South America to create a white ethnostate about 100 years ago, and it didn't work out. No. Now there's a lot of reasons that it didn't work out. It could have, the reasons could have been racial, but they could have been other things. But I don't think it was wrong of them to try, and I certainly don't think that it's wrong of Spencer and Enoch and those guys to try if they wanted to. I think that's fine.
No, let them try, but just try it away from the strongest nation that's been ever built. I like the values that built this nation. Mm-hmm. I love those values, and I will fight for those values. I do not agree that those values should inherently favor one race. Those values are made to promote those who live the values. Mm-hmm. Well, and as long as those values are being lived and exemplified, whoever the strong emerge that practice those values should be rewarded. They should receive that due merit and reward, regardless of what they happen to look like. The fact that most of them are white, to me, is just happy coincidence. Mm-hmm. But they could be, like, for example, up until the New Deal, whites and blacks had a very comparable income and crime rate, actually, and they were also comparable for marriage. So I think that most of our problems are not on the surface ethnic. They are, in fact, in a problem of the values of our policies, which the New Deal brought into effect, which was basically the welfare state.
Well, I would definitely say that that had a lot to do with it, but I would also say that if you look at Africa, you know, no democracy has ever lasted there. You know, they have thousands of years of history, and they tend to favor a certain style of being, and they tend to create a certain.
You're absolutely
society.
right. You are absolutely right. Yet those Africans who today are successful in migrating here to America are more successful than the Black Americans who are, for all intents and purposes, ethnically American.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't want to cause a brain drain. Now, see, this is another problem with just with focusing too much on with not okay, because I think that there has to be a middle ground there on declaring that that we are wanting to preserve whites and white people because they're worthy of preserving, and if we don't implicitly do that, then they're going to go extinct. And then there's also the idea of setting up rules that do allow for some, you know, minorities, but we know that are overwhelmingly going to favor white people. And then, you know, there's the idea of those minorities, though. If we're allowing just anyone who kind of like just an IQ test or something like this, and well, if you have over 130 IQ, you can come to America. Well, then that takes all of the high functioning people out of Africa.
It takes all the people capable of changing and evolving the nation and bringing them to ours. And you can argue that that's not fair, and I would agree with you. But what we need to first decide is whether or not all the people that we're taking are truly those of that kind of caliber of IQ. We might not be taking people over here on basis of IQ, and I'm fairly certain we're not. We're still in the Obama Clinton era diversity lottery.
Oh yeah, we're not right now. I'm just saying in a hypothetical future where we.
No, I mean right now, just the diversity lottery of the African migrants who come here are outperforming the native blacks who are here. That is a testament of virtue over genetics, in my view.
Maybe and maybe not. I think that I would need to look into that further, because obviously if you have, again, a high percentage of Nigerians or Ethiopians coming over, they tend to have higher IQs and higher functional societies than people in the Congo, for example, or Somalia.
If I recall correctly, I'm trying to remember the nation. The gentleman that I met at work. I used to work security. Actually, I worked security for the stadium that the Cowboys practiced in, the new Dallas Star.
Mm-hmm.
He came from a bordering nation of Mauritania, where it's the nation with the highest percentage of slaves, like Northern Africa kind of nation, somewhere where you would never suspect someone with high IQ to come from. And he by no means was a rocket scientist, but he was one of those chosen to come over. And you know, you could tell he had a hard work ethic about him. He was very diligent in his work, and but the quality of person that he was from this northern African nation that was clearly it bordered Mauritania, and it was Mauritania is that nation where slavery, like 1 in 25 people are slaves in Mauritania.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he happily informed me that was not due to blacks, that it was due to the Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
And I suddenly realized, yes, okay. So we need to validate these claims or these suspicions that we're taking those with high IQ, or that where they're from nations known for high IQ. That's not necessarily the case. we
No,
don't know that.
No, we're not doing that currently. I don't know if we're doing that currently as vis-a-vis the African migrants. Like I said, I don't know what's going on there. But we do have a super chat. Jilly Storm 499. Thank you, Jilly. And she says, Spencer says use race as a sole proxy, not vetting, because at the end of the day, 97% of approved people are going to be white, and it saves you time and money just to say it's an ethnostate. Yeah, and I think that there's some truth in that. I would also say that one of the issues with bringing over people from other countries into America, whether or not they have high IQs or they don't, or diversity or whatever, is that our ancestors sacrificed everything to come and to build this country and create it. And they were very explicit when they said that they built it for themselves and their posterity. And people from Nigeria, people from China, people from Mexico are not their posterity. And I do think that there is an element of honoring the system that our ancestors created and what they wanted in when we're talking about immigration and who we allow in the country. And
on that note, the majority of Americans are not descended from the founding fathers. We're not. They're not the descendants of the original Pilgrims or those who participated in the Revolution. And,
well, I mean, that right now, that might be true because like we just said, whites are what, 67, 65%, and maybe there could be up to 20% of that being counted as white could be Latino. So I haven't heard that statistic before that you're saying, but even if it were true, obviously currently that makes sense because we might, depending on whether or not that 20% is Latino and what they're, whatever, then we might be looking at a white minority in our country right now anyways. So that would make sense if the majority of Americans wouldn't have founding father Mayflower DNA.
Yes.
But I don't think that was all. I don't think that was necessarily always the case if you went back 100 years.
Well, yes, but the case is most of these people being brought over could ostensibly be presumed to serve those who are the descendants. They're serving the successful, the capitalists, the old money and the new money of our economy. That's who they serve. That's the reason they're being brought over here. I hope, or I would certainly that would be my ideal. It isn't.
Yeah, I think they're being brought over currently just to as voters. I think that
no, I'm completely against that as well. But that's an immigration issue, and again, I would personally relegate that still as a civic national issue. But the point is, just to say that we're here to preserve the posterity of the founding fathers is just too much of a stretch. I mean, I know one person personally that I know. No, make that two people in all my life that I know who are direct descendants of our founding fathers or those who fought in either the American Revolution, the Civil War, so on and so forth.
Well, then you've met another one because I am. And I've
met three.
What I would say the reverse in that I very rarely have met a white person who isn't. So anecdotally, if we're getting out the anecdotes, I honestly, in fact, it was quite shocking when I was first talking to Lana from Red Ice Radio because her family immigrated over here from Russia, I think 2 generations ago or something. And I was like, whoa, really? Like but you're white. All the white people I've known just about in my life, with very few exceptions, have been, they either trace back to, the Mayflower, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, but all of the criteria that you just laid out.
Well, I would say that if you were to actually and go ahead and make a survey of this. I'm curious to know what results you get. But most of my experiences, most people, most Americans are not, even white Americans, specifically white Americans, are not. Most of them are not related to the founding fathers or the two great wars, the Revolution and the Civil.
I would imagine there's a population issue here, as far as are you a convert to Mormonism? Are you
My parents are converts. I was raised in the church.
Oh, okay. But you were raised in the church though, and so a lot of the people that you would be associating with, were they Mormon or not, or like the majority?
Absolutely. The thing is, I grew up in La Puente, California. That's 20 minutes east of East LA.
Okay, right, yeah.
So I got to grow up where the old gangsters retired, and I got to watch the children pick up the business.
Yeah.
And that was fun. I'll be perfectly honest. I had a blast.
Yeah. Well, I would say then I think I think it's a West Coast thing, and I think it's a Mormon thing to encounter a lot of white people who are not descendants from, again, those criteria that you laid out: Revolutionary War, Civil War, etc. I was born in Tennessee, and all of my family is from Maryland, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina. And I was not born in the Mormon church or any of that. I don't have any Mormon family. That I would say, even though I grew up on the West Coast, but a lot of my interactions, particularly with people that I would have known, it would have come up in conversation about their genealogy and where they're from. The population I was drawing from were overwhelmingly descendants of those criteria. And I would say right now, if you were to go east of the Mississippi, the majority of white people that you're going to encounter would meet those criteria that you laid out. And I think that I would imagine, just based on my experience, that at least half, if not more, of white Americans would meet that criteria that you just laid out. But
well,
again,
I would agree with that east of the Mississippi. I would agree with that. But most of the what you might call white majority states, Montana, Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Texas, Colorado, and even Texas is going Hispanic. And Texas has a lot of Civil War history as well, but that number definitely changes as you go west. I don't know what the percentage is as far as majority white people states or communities as you go east or west, whether or not what their percentages are. Well, I do know that Idaho, Utah, and Nevada, and all that whole section is majority white.
Well, they are majority white. They were founded mostly by pioneers and Mormons, and so those were people that were coming over in the 1850s. And so, they definitely would have skipped the Revolutionary War, Civil War era in our country. But again, if the states that have the highest white population is actually in New England. So up in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and so forth, they have.
I would have thought that the infestation from New York would have cut that down quite a bit.
Not yet. No, they're like 97.3% white and things like that up in that area. I've looked up the demographics extensively, so I can say this with all confidence that those are the whitest areas in our country.
I think I have a suspicion as to why, and it's not geographic. I think it's economic.
It could be. Obviously, those areas were settled by European people originally, and I think that one of the reasons that it hasn't seen a huge migration up into there is the weather, because to just honestly, non-white people don't love the cold. White people do very.
It's not just weather; it's because New York gets cold.
Well, yes, but then also, that's one of the factors.
But I think another thing is the prices of real estate and the fact that they're small states and everything's already pretty much taken up. It's an old money environment.
It could be.
that doesn't surprise me.
There could be a lot of reasons for it, yeah, but definitely those are the highest white majorities. All right, so I'm going to have to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm already a little bit over time, and but I just wanted to read a couple of things from the chat. Sovereign wrote, "White people don't have to legitimize their right to their own territories. We only have to decide we want it back, and the leeches will go. It's up to them how they go." Let's see. Do liberalists offer classes on condensing laughter? It hurts their cause. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Let's see here if we have any more.
No one knows what that means.
Let's see. Okay, I think that might be the only ones that were directed in general. It looks like. Anyways, so yeah, I would just say that yeah, that I think that for me in closing, for me, there's two ways to look at this, and that is, again, that there is this ideal of a society that we want, that we will build in the future. For right now, though, because we are under such distress as a race, we do need to really wake up and decide that white people are worth saving, because everybody else, I would say everybody else, you know, Chinese people, Japanese people, African people, for the most part, operate on a race-based system. They put their own race and their own people first. And if whites don't start running in this game, we're going to lose before we even realize that we're the only ones not playing this game that's going on.
I will close by simply saying that if we as a Western society start enforcing our own damn rules, it won't matter. It won't matter in the end, because we'll have a prosperous nation. And to be perfectly honest, white people are going to flourish in the cultural of a Western society, regardless of whether or not that's our goal. And
yes,
honestly, that is the best way forward, is just reinforcing Western values.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. That's pretty much everything that's on my list for achieving the ethnostate is definitely just enforcing our rules and our values
But you don't need the
that we have
ethnostate.
before.
You don't need the ethnostate if you just have the values enforced.
Yes,
You don't need it.
I definitely want to hold it within consciousness that preservation of the white race is something that's also valuable and important. So that's why I would still term myself an ethno-nationalist, and I would, even though, again, like I said, you and I overlap. Your version of civic nationalism overlaps with me, quite a lot. On a Venn diagram, our circles would be almost overlapping entirely. But
yes,
I
but
definitely would still call myself an ethno-nationalist. What's
white
that?
White people become weaker when they don't acknowledge that family is war. We don't flourish very well if we don't intercompete with one another. If we don't hold each other aloof and start realizing that, yes, this is my competitor, that's what makes us strong, and that's why we have these values as they're set up.
I would disagree, because I would say that that's what makes us weak, and that's what makes things happen, like the Rotterdam incident, where thousands of white girls in Britain were raped by Muslims, was because other white men didn't see them as their people and didn't see them as their family, because these girls were orphans or people who didn't have fathers, or who mothers were alcoholics or whatever, and their immediate family wasn't there for them. And that when we think too hyper individually like that, then it leads to issues like the mass rapes in Rotterdam.
That's not individualism. That's just degeneracy. That individuals do not gain pleasure from watching others suffer.
No, I'm not saying they gain pleasure from watching it. That what happens there is when feel like you're competing with your own people in your own community, that it's family against family, then that's when girls like that slip through the cracks and can be violated in the way that happened in Rotterdam. And I would rather see us grow strong as a nation because we work together and because we understand that we are a family, as a nation, as a brotherhood, as an ethnicity, as everything else, and that we are working for the greater good of the whole community as well as our own families, because we feel that interconnectedness with our literal family being our ethnicity.
Yeesh. I don't see the connection with white men looking away as girls are being raped as being that friction that creates that white men help create among themselves that increases competition and vibrancy. I don't see the connection.
I see the connection because I think that, well, maybe I misunderstood what you said, but I think that when we are thinking about ourselves as individuals and we're not thinking of ourselves in certain collectives, then we...
Oh, no, you misunderstand. When I say family is war, when I say family is war, I mean it's within the confines of the family. Sibling rivalry is healthy and acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that sibling rivalry with the values we hold that makes that has truly made the West the best. That is what has made us the powerhouse that we are. And we do need that level of individualism. I don't think that competition is what leads to men watching other girls get raped. That's completely...
Well, I'm just saying that, yeah, I think that
what I'm speaking to.
Hyper individualism, if we don't see ourselves as connected to other people within our community, is what leads to things like Rotterdam, is what I'm saying. So that would be my fear if we're looking at our family and our nation in too much in a competitive manner, too much in this warlike manner, then that's when the child down the street is, becomes not my problem. Is what I'm saying there. That's what I would be worried about. Too much hyper individualism leading to, and I'm very individualistic. I mean, my ideal society would be very libertarian. It's just that I understand that that a libertarian society is mostly only appealing to and compatible with ethnically European people, and that's just a statistical reality that I have to deal with. As somebody who would want that sort of level of freedom.
As I said, to me, that's a civic national issue. It really is.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we agree on so much, and hopefully going forward, more people can agree, and we can start kind of trying to fix. There's a lot of different messes that our country, America, is in, and a lot of different messes that a lot of Western nations are in right now. So hopefully, however we get there, we can work together and try to clean up some of these messes. But thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. I want to thank everybody who was here in the chats, and I want to thank the people who donated in the super chat. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for putting up with hearing my baby in the background. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening and a wonderful rest of your week going into the weekend. And I will see you guys again next Thursday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.